Multigreen, building attainable, sustainable, and tech-enabled multifamily real estate through impact investing.
Welcome to the Multigreen podcast. I'm your host, Randy Norton, and today we'll be speaking with venture capitalist, former CEO and director of Invitation Homes, and real estate visionary, Fred Tuomi. As the former president of property management at Equity Residential, the nation's largest multifamily REIT, Fred's encyclopedic knowledge is beyond. We are fortunate to have him on board as a member of the Multigreen Executive Committee, Operations Committee, and Investment Committee. Enjoy our conversation. All right, Fred. Well, thanks for joining us today on the Multigreen podcast. I've been wanting to do this one with you for a long time. Would you mind telling our listeners about your prolific background and what got you to this point?
Oh my, I don't know how prolific it is, but it's been a wild ride, and I'm not done yet. I've been blessed with, about 40, a little over 40 years of cumulative, experiences and just the thrill of a lifetime of being in the residential real estate business, primarily in the residential rental real estate business. And I got into it at a very young age, obviously. But I got into it through kind of the side door. I was a technology guy. I was a geek before geeks were cool. And I was writing programs and developing systems and conceiving them back in the days when computers were just getting started. And a very forward-thinking visionary of that time in the real estate business thought, you know what, these things called computers, I've been reading about them, and one day, they're going to be not just down in the basement crunching numbers, but they're going to be out there, in the hands of people doing things, working and living. So he actually had this grand vision of automating everything manual about buying and investing and renovating and operating and managing real estate. I was this guy working for a big IT consulting firm and got the call and said, these people want to think about this. So I didn't know anything about the business, but I immediately connected with the chairman of this company, who's a visionary and became my mentor, and just kind of fell in love with the whole idea.
And who was that visionary, Fred?
It was a man named John Lee Nielsen. Back in the day, this was like late 70s, early 80s. He's on the cover of Fortune magazine. He had built a real estate empire and a fundraising empire called Consolidated Capital, and the apartment company was called Johnstown Properties. A lot of people don't know about it unless you were active back then, but at one point, I think at our pinnacle, we had over 300,000 apartment units across the country, and it was a massive undertaking. So I got to learn the business from the ground up. I interviewed maintenance technicians and leasing agents and property managers and portfolio managers and vice presidents and accounting people and marketing people and PR people and everybody, and just started taking notes and learning and soaking it in, and drew a map of all the interdependencies and how all data, was derived and linked, and it was all done manually. So I basically mimicked how things were being done, by word of mouth and pen and paper onto a computer system. And I won't bore the listeners with all the details, but basically we actually conceived and developed a very, for its time, avant-garde, computer system that was used by site employees. We put computers in every office across the country. There were literally hundreds of thousands of them. And we connected them all through a data network. We did a joint venture with IBM and developed. I hired a bunch of programmers and we designed it, developed it, and then we deployed it. It took maybe 3 or 4 years. And then we sold it to other companies, and it became the de facto kind of premier management system for the apartment business and condominium management business. And then we ended up selling that business to Prentice Hall, which was gathering up software companies back at that time. And then they sold it to a company called RealPage. And to this day, RealPage is one of the largest software solution providers for the real estate industry. And then their core product for apartments, if you dig really deep down in the bowels of that system, some of the code was my code. So
that is fantastic. I love RealPage.
So I learned the business that way, inside out, talking to people, just from pure ignorance and just curiosity. Once that was kind of over, maybe it was a huge career mistake, but I decided, you know what, I love this business so much and I love the people. And I was so kind of sucked into the whole idea. I asked to be, to stay on with the company instead of going with the software venture. He welcomed me and sponsored me and basically tutored me and then gave me huge responsibility of running real estate portfolios way beyond my age or experience should have justified. He just gave me the opportunity of a lifetime. So next thing I know, I was managing big areas of the company and portfolios and people and processes. And I was in charge of the accounting department for a while and the marketing department for a while and training and then running my own portfolio. So I just basically learned it and fell in love with the business. And then, things cycle, business cycles, macroeconomic things cycle. That business, which was based on tax advantage limited partnerships, came to a screeching halt in 1986 with the Tax Reform Act law of 1986. So it kind of blew up, and then it kind of splintered into a lot of distressed real estate. Some of the listeners may remember the Great Savings and Loan Crisis, which was similar to the Great Financial Crisis we recently went through, and then the RTC, the resolution company that was sifting through and kind of recycling all of the distressed real estate. So created a huge opportunity, and I was there at the right time. So I became a participant in the management of and the triage of and the recovery of a massive amount of real estate across the country, and sharpened my skills through necessity on the property management. And then as things changed again, the public companies started coming into vogue. It was called the great securitization of real estate. Real estate had been owned pretty much by local entrepreneurs, private investors, small group of people who would buy an apartment building or several of them. There was no big institutional ownership or operation of real estate, and that began to change with the advent of the real estate investment trusts. And a man named Sam Zell was the father of that industry. He conceived it and developed it and promoted it and got others on board. And he created one of the first large real estate investment trusts, actually a couple of them, one for office buildings, which was Equity Office, one for mobile home parks, which started off as manufactured home communities, which is now Equity Lifestyles, and then the flagship, which was Equity Residential, the largest apartment company. And just through absolute coincidence, kind of a just fate, I had an opportunity to meet the people there, and then decided to take another big career move and moved to Chicago. And I was able to be involved with that whole process of becoming a public company for apartments. And we became the largest in the nation. And my responsibility was to build the operations area of the company. So I was president of the property management group within that venture, and hired people, opened offices, and we grew that to over 200,000 apartments. So that's how I got into the business.
What trends did you see during these crises? Anything that can help protect or detect or inform for future problems in the industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the moment, there's always a great deal of fear, anxiety, doubt. Like, oh my God, this is so bad. We'll never be able to survive. And I remember feeling that way. It's very, very depressing, very disturbing. But what I learned by going through several of these cycles, some of them very severe, some of them, more short-lived, some of them directly related to real estate, some of them just macro in the world, was that things do cycle. And when it seems really bad, things will get better. And that the disciplined, calm, thoughtful people and organizations and approach to any kind of crisis, is what carries the day. I learned early on that don't panic, look for opportunity, hold on to what you have, the best you can, find ways to survive, but then most importantly, look for opportunities to thrive, because things will come back. And if you're thoughtful and positioned and disciplined, you can ride that wave and then come out of it at a much higher point when you look back than you were before, whether it's on a personal basis or whether it's on a business and organizational basis. So in each one of these major crises, we were able to come out of it much stronger.
And you specifically did a lot during the last crisis.
Yes, because I can remember going through the apartment business, but after the apartment business, I had a very good run there and decided to retire. I'm not very good at retirement. I failed it twice already. But phone rang and I had an opportunity, and that was right after the great financial crisis. So I was a little nervous about that. It's not really the best time to retire. But I got a call from people saying, wow, we see huge dislocation, huge distress, and a lot of just value being destroyed in the real estate sector again, primarily in the residential and primarily in the single family home business. And we all know the story because it's very recent how a lot of people were over leveraged with their homes. A lot of people were using homes as a slot machine or an ATM. And there wasn't a lot of discipline by lenders or by buyers or by brokers. And they created a bubble situation. And it, as they all do, it blew up. And then it created a lot of pain. But then it does have to be triage, and it does have to be resolved. And capital, in our great, country that we are in the great capitalist system, capital is what private capital mostly is what, saves the day. So risk capital came in and started buying these homes, very, very risky. They were going through foreclosure, which is not a good thing, but it is what it is. The fact was there that no one could change that. So what are we going to do? We started buying foreclosed homes by the tens, by the 20s, by the hundreds, by the thousands, by the multiple thousands. It was really pretty sad because I remember seeing these, you're going through the process, and the homes were really just destroyed. You could tell families used to live there. It was home to where people live, where they had their good times and celebrations, and they were just basically destroyed and were being in a state of decay. Not all of them, but many, many, many of them. So it took some bold, risk takers to buy these homes in bulk. You weren't allowed to do any due diligence. You couldn't even go inside them, so you didn't know what you were getting. We did it. We bought them. We renovated them. We cleaned them up. We painted them. We fixed the roofs. We reinstalled the appliances and cabinets, put in landscaping, and then put a for rent sign in the front, and rehabilitated them with families who wanted to be in these neighborhoods. And the neighborhoods were revitalized, and it was very rewarding to see the recovery and being part of that, creating the next round of opportunity.
Well, thanks for that background. What did you see as a common trait from those bold investors that you speak about?
I've been very blessed in my career to be able to be around some very, very smart people and great action-oriented real estate visionaries. I'm the operations guy. I was the one responsible for making it work for most of my career. That has a different orientation, and I always admired those that were the ones on the forefront of like saying, we can do this. They didn't know how they could do it. That was my job, but they would make stuff happen. That's from that original one I mentioned, John Lee Nielsen, just a wonderful visionary. His partner, George Lane, which was pretty much in the southeastern United States, headquartered in Atlanta. And then Sam Zell, on the global stage of investing in corporate and real estate. And then I had the pleasure of working with Tom Barrack with Colony Capital. And then most recently, the absolute pleasure of working with the Blackstone organization of John Gray and all of the wonderful people there. Incredibly successful, but I think the common trait is staying calm in periods of chaos, of being thoughtful, of being never over committed in terms of leverage or taking excessive, not wild, but just excessive risk during the good times, so that you're always prepared for the inevitable, which is the turning of the bad times. So they're always prepared, and then have the power of not only foresight, but conviction, and know when it's time to actually not talk about it, but to do it. And sometimes you don't have it totally buttoned down. You don't know because there's no such thing as certainty. If there's certainty, there's not going to be much of a return, maybe no return. They're willing to see an opportunity, assess the risk, and then the power of conviction and able to get stuff done.
So the markets are inefficient.
There is inefficiency, but also, markets are efficient in that they reward risk taking. Now, there's always the chance it doesn't work, and that's okay too, because I've seen each one of these groups, make some mistakes along the way, but they learn from them, adapt. They don't identify with it. They just say, okay, let's change, let's adapt, and let's learn from it, and let's move on.
Let's continue to talk about the mistakes and the problems and potential solutions of this industry. You've been in it now for a very considerable amount of your career, and it seems like the experts always get it wrong. But we know, the investment thesis of Multigreen is that there is a substantial housing crisis, and it's not just in California, it's not just in the United States, it's a global one. What are some of the problems that you see just perpetuating and not getting resolved decade after decade?
Before I get to that specifically, that reminded me of one other concept about this business, especially, I think all real estate, because things happen in real estate. And it's becoming a little more blurred now, especially with work from home that we're going through right now. But, transactions occur, retail, lodging, people go to work, people come home. They're in three-dimensional space and occupying land. And that's the real estate business. And so the real estate business really is the great enabler for all sorts of commerce and all sorts of community throughout the world. Because we're not just some orb sitting on a shelf in our, somewhere connected by, some network. Maybe 1,000 years from now, that may be the case. I hope not. But we have a great lens into the pulse of what's going on in the world if you just observe and listen. And on the residential piece, I always thought it was fascinating, is we deal with people's homes, and we see and we experience and we co-journey with their journey. If things are great and people are getting new jobs and they're moving to certain cities and they have disposable income and they want to improve their living situation for their families and themselves, then we see that. And then whenever there's a worry in the world and people need to start being more thoughtful, more careful, more cautious, more conservative, and they want to lower their cost of living, we see that. People losing their jobs, we see it. Sometimes we hear it first because they'll talk to us and they'll tell us, hey, I may have problems with my rent, or I may have to move quickly. So we see all these trends. And I remember during the early stages of the great financial crisis, we saw more cancellations, more early terminations, more slow pay, more delinquency, more people telling us that they're worried about their job, telling us that they lost their job. And then conversely, if things started picking up, we saw it because people were sending in applications. People were started moving again, with economic mobility as the economy picked up. So it's a great way of keeping tabs on the health of an economy and people by just watching our business.
Truly on the front lines.
It's really on the front line if you watch it and listen on these trends. Now, mistakes we've made. So one is if you ignore those and you just think trees grow to the sky and rents will always go up and expenses will always be flat, or slightly down, and you pro forma that and you just rely on that, you're going to be setting yourself up for big disappointment. So you have to be aware of things cycle. It's never as good as it seems forever, and it's never as bad as it seems forever. So that's a hard lesson to remember. And especially newer people in the business look at the most recent trend and then they'll extrapolate it forever. Things don't work that way. So I think a lot of underwriting mistakes were made because people thought this is great and it's going to continue like Jack and the Beanstalk. But on a more macro basis, one thing that frustrated me through a lot of my career and frustrates me today, economics. I believe in capitalism and I believe in economic theory, supply and demand, a willing buyer, a willing seller, always neutralizes itself and you find that equilibrium point. And if there's excess demand, the economy, business will find a way to meet that demand to bring prices back down. If there's excess supply, people will stop producing until the demand picks up and the prices recover. This works. Whenever there's intervention or there's just other forces to play, things get out of balance on that and it creates imbalances, unintended consequences. And what that means in this business, and which I've seen over the years, is supply and demand of living space. We'll talk about multifamily apartments. There's incredible demand because population grows. The Earth's population continues to grow. That's just mathematics. You can't deny it. We're expanding our population. We need housing to meet that demand. Certain areas are attracting more people. We have to meet that demand. But the frustrating thing is we're not able to build enough supply to meet that demand. So what happens? You have a shortage. What happens with a shortage? There is a cascading effect of prices going up, and then people's living standards have to go down if their incomes aren't able to support that. So I saw that over the years and decades, and today, even worse, is that generally across the country, across the world, we're not producing enough housing to take care of our population. And that's a big mistake of society. And then in the United States, it's definitely true. And on certain markets of ours where more people are moving to instead of from, and there's economic growth that accelerates and accentuates that trend, there's just not enough housing. What do we do about it? Some people say, well, you just need to legislate that and put in regulation, commoditize it, and make it a government resource. So you have rent control and you have public housing. Well, that's not a sustainable model, in my opinion. People will not be happy with that result. So then they say, well, we'll just tax it, or we'll put in fees, or we'll require people to have a small portion of affordable housing and then just increase the prices on everything else, which then just perpetuates price increases for the bulk of the population. A lot of things just start going awry. And I'm not smart enough to know what the total solution is. I have some ideas on that, but I do know job number one of our industry is to produce more housing of all types and across all price points. And that's where Multigreen comes in, is that we are committed, and our vision and our focus and made it our mission to do something about that, to stimulate more supply and hopefully to show others that it can be done. So many others will join us on that mission to add to the supply of housing, because that's the only thing long-term to resolve the escalating cost of housing and the diminished quality of housing. If you look at across the markets, most, not all, but most of the new units being added are luxury, super luxury, high price, because that's the only way you can justify the cost these days. So that means that the more, quote, affordable is relegated to the old, substandard, kind of outdated, become functionally obsolete housing that our teachers, our first responders, our working people have to live in further and further away from the job centers. And that's just not right. So we the collective, we as a society, we can do much better than that. Our industry is ready, willing, and able to build more housing. We just need some cooperation and assistance by letting us do our thing with fewer roadblocks. So Multigreen is committed to being a catalyst to make this happen, which is a very, very, wonderful vision and mission. It's something that needs to be done. It's attracting like-minded individuals to join this, and it's attracting impact capital that wants to be part of a solution and not part of a problem. And I think the time is right. So, what you've created, Randy, is something big and bold, and that's what we need to solve this long-term challenge. And I'm just very proud and humbled to be a little part of it to help you along the way.
Well, you've been a big part of it, and that's a perfect segue to Multigreen. You recently joined us as a board member on the executive committee. In your opinion, what is the opportunity set here for Multigreen? How big is this opportunity really?
Wow. The opportunity or the need is huge. We need literally millions of units of housing worldwide. And in this country, if we could snap our fingers today, we would need to add 4 or 5 million units of housing tomorrow to really make a meaningful impact on the supply and demand balance of housing when and where we need it at all price points, so that all families have legitimate access to the appropriate housing for their families. The need is huge. So this is a grand opportunity. So Multigreen has just taken it upon itself to lead the charge, and hopefully others will follow. And therefore, being the visionary and being the leader, will have the opportunity to demonstrate and to make it happen before anyone else. So the opportunity is just tremendous. We're only going to be limited by land, labor, and capital. We have to find the appropriate sites. We have to hire the right people. We have to align with the right partners. We have to get like-minded capital to provide the necessary risk capital to build. And then we need to have the right people to align with and to employ to serve our residents of the future, which are going to be these families. I think will be very pleased with the housing that we can provide, that it's going to be sustainable, it's going to be green, it's going to be thoughtful, it's going to be brand new, built just for them and their families, and it's going to be configured for today's families and their needs, and it's going to be very richly rewarding.
To start from 0 units and go to 40,000 units by 2030, can you explain to the listeners what that roadmap requires?
Yeah, that's when I first met with you, Randy. You told me that vision and that goal, and I thought, wow, 0 to 40,000. That's a big, bold, bodacious goal. But like anything else, whenever you're faced with something large, what do? Well, first you're overwhelmed, then you just take a deep breath, step back, and say, okay, I'm going to do it. And the longest journey starts with the first step. And all those cliches of how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. So you start breaking it down, something that seems unachievable and overly complex, and you break it into its incremental parts. And that's what you've done so far is, you conceived the first deal, and then, wow, it's come together. And then number 2, and then number 3, your momentum is already building because you've got already opportunity for properties and units, I think over 1,100 or so in the hopper right now. So it's already started. You break it down, and I thought, well, okay, 10-year goal, 40,000, that's 4,000 units per year. We can do this. It'll make you one of the major developers in the country, not by a big margin. It's certainly doable, but you have to start, and you have to be committed, and you have to cause things to happen. And that's what you're doing.
So Fred, you've taken 2 companies public or been a part of 2 public companies. Is that possible for Multigreen?
You never want to think too much about that in the moment, because in the moment, our mission is to establish, Multigreen in its mission. We need to build new housing in a sustainable and attainable fashion so that we can meet our mission. When it comes in the future, if you're successful in that, you will have lots of opportunities for how you position it and grow it in the future. I love the idea of a public real estate company. By definition, a public company is there in business, whatever business it's in perpetuity. It's not a timed thing. It's not just a partnership with a 5-year sunset or a 10-year horizon, or something that has to be recapitalized or sold in order to keep it going, or broken up into parts. By definition, a public company is owned by shareholders, and that shareholder base can change every day. In fact, it does change hands every day on the stock market. But the entity is built for sustainability, in perpetuity, which is a long time. It seems appropriate, and I think it's certainly doable, especially as we grow, because you'll have to have some relevant scale in order to be, considered, a candidate for a public offering. We can get there once we're at 10, 15, 20, 30,000 units, certainly by 40. And if we are successful at our mission, then people will want to be part of it, and the public markets will welcome you, and you'll be successful. So you have to have a going concern. It has to be meaningful. It has to be a sustainable long-term business, not just a trade. And it has to have a track record and a reputation and some intangible goodwill value through its brand and its reputation in the marketplace. You know, Randy, your vision that you've articulated and the team that you're building, working towards that, you're building that foundation today. So you will have that opportunity. If you choose at some point in the future that transformation to a public company, which gives you many benefits, including access to capital from around the globe at a very attractive low cost that allows you to do things even bigger, even bolder. Once you've created critical mass, then that's available to you. Do you have to do it? No. Is it something that's absolutely possible? For sure.
Well, I appreciate that insight, Fred. We have 2 more questions for you today. We ask all of our participants one word. When you say, or in the spirit of multigreen, and when I say multigreen, you'll respond with some of your favorite green things. So when you hear the word green, what does that trigger for you?
Well, the first image that came to my head was, I'm very blessed. I'm in Dallas, Texas today, but I have a home in Scottsdale, Arizona, and one in San Diego area of California, where my grandchildren are. My home in Scottsdale is what flashed in front of me because I have a beautiful view out of the back patio. And the home has lots of windows, and I sit out there sometime in the morning with my coffee or in the evening with my beverage of choice. And it's a sea of green grass and fields and shrubs and cactus and trees and verde trees, which have green bark. And then, the beautiful red and brown and different hues of the mountains, and then the blue sky or the black evening sky. And it's all those different shades of green. Sometimes I sit there and just look at it and observe all of the subtle but very compatible shades of green. So it's really a cool thing, and it's year round. I always thought the desert was kind of like why would you want to live there? It's kind of ugly. It's not. It is an absolutely beautiful place, and there's so much green. It's not just sand.
With you explaining that, wow, I can see it literally in my head.
Yeah, and it's the subtle thing from little leaves, and then the contrast with the bigger leaves behind it, and then the grass over it, and then a cactus over there, and the cactus in bloom, and then this one over there. And then all of the wildlife, the quail, the rabbits, lynx, bobcats, occasional snakes, but we don't talk about that. And then same thing in California, blessed there with a beautiful grounds with all sorts of trees, eucalyptus trees, which are many shades of green, and all of the flowers and all the great lush landscape. You really have to do much, and it just grows out there in California. And then last is, I guess while I was talking, I thought my girlfriend here in Dallas, who's a incredibly talented, world-class musician, a classical musician, has green eyes. And you don't see many people with green eyes. At least I hadn't in my life. And all of a sudden, like, whoa, what is that? Vibrant, green-colored eyes. It's like mesmerizing. So that's pretty cool.
Well, I look forward to meeting her one day and seeing your view in Arizona one day, and also swinging by your San Diego home. Well, thanks for sharing that. That was wonderful articulation of shades of green. So here's the last question for you, Fred. It is the end of 2020, and we have shared an audacious goal, like you mentioned, on the world stage of building 40,000 units by 2030. And not only 40,000 units, but they are attainable. And if we do this correctly, they'll be sustainable and certainly tech-enabled. We're improving the state of the world by doing our part. And if you just had one wish for Multigreen, what would it be?
Well, first of all, I'm glad we're at the end of 2020. This has been a wonderful year, but obviously a very curious year. I'll be glad when we're past this. But the word wish is kind of a fleeting concept. It creates expectation of, well, it might happen or it might not happen, or I'll be lucky if it happens. Hope is not a strategy. So I think wishing is not a strategy. So I'll morph it a little bit into what I expect. And I expect Multigreen will be successful in attaining and achieving its vision and its mission and its commitment of one day, not that distant future, you will be able to look at your portfolio and say, wow, we have X thousand of new homes that we've built. And wow, we have X thousands of people, mothers, fathers, children, young couples, old couples, new immigrants, people of all walks of life living in these homes, and they're experiencing their lives in them. And you'll be able to demonstrate that, once again, the private sector with like-minded people with risk capital committed to a purpose can achieve anything. And you'll see 40,000 new homes, the first 40,000, by the way, by 2039 or 2038, and then re-upping, for the next 100,000. That's what I expect.
Fred, it's just a pure inspiration and joy to speak with you. I am so grateful that we had this opportunity to do this podcast today, and I know that our listeners are going to enjoy it.
I'm just thankful and feel blessed to be part of this opportunity and watch you along the way. So good luck to you and all of your associates.
Thanks so much, Fred.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Join us as we build 40,000 attainable, sustainable, and tech-enabled multifamily homes by 2030. And if you like the content you're hearing, hit the subscribe button. Follow us at Think Multigreen and sign up to learn more at www.multi.green.